It's my end of my 35th year. Planning on doing some more part-time next year. We'll see how it goes. Getting harder to throw that net than it used to be. But now with the jigging happening in the summertime, that's going to change a lot. So, but on a note, to some of you that have been around for a while, we had a death this week. Mark Barber, the fish whisperer, passed away on Monday. Had a massive heart attack at home. Apparently went really quick, but he was the one that you always saw down, tied to the boom around the dam area in the John boat. Real tall guy, white hat, real loud, laughing, drinking beer, you know. But he passed away this week, so for those that knew him. But anyway, I didn't do a presentation. The last time I did this, I just did questions and answers to more of like, what do you guys want to ask me about that I might know? And along with the bucket story, I'll tell another story real quick.
Yes.
Over there, usually everybody sees me, my hair's back like this, I got my hat on, I'm wearing fishing gear. So when I get out like this, I get out and about town and with Spike and go to dinner like at Bernard's Landing in a corporate account. And I walk up to the table next to Spike and everybody goes, and it's, where's Kathy? I'm like, oh, I didn't recognize you without your clothes on. So that's happened about 4 or 5 times over the years. But anyway, that's me. I'm the only lady guide on the lake that keeps up with all the boys. So if Spike gets on me about one and about I'm a little tired or whatever, I'm 5'2", and I've thrown all the nets, caught the fish, cleaned the fish, run the boat, carried batteries, you know, all of it. Broke down, you know, anything that could happen's happened over the years, so. But anyway, so now up for questions.
Kathy, I just want to start you out with a question, if you don't
Yeah.
mind. Can you talk about, because we have a lot of, you can probably tell, and so the new folks in here, the Striper Club took a break. The Striper Club took a break for about 2 years during COVID. And when the Striper Club came back together, the membership changed dramatically. There are a lot of folks that moved into the lake area during COVID, so we have a lot of new, different types of members. A lot of very experienced fishermen, and a lot of people who have gone out with a guide, caught a striper, and they're hooked, right? Pun, right? Can you talk to the group, especially these newer folks, about how the lake has changed fishing-wise in the last 10 or 15 years? And like we think, and maybe you have a different opinion, we think it's because of the bluebacks and how they've come into the lake and made things different, right?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah, they're a deep water bait, the bluebacks, and it seems like the fish have changed their patterns and are feeding more on those. So the things that I've seen over the years, in the spring, they don't go up into Craddock Creek. Oops. Put my smartwatch on, sorry. They don't go up into Craddock Creek like they used to. That used to be one of my favorite places to fish in May, and they just don't seem to go in there like they used to. I guess they're still spawning up at Mariners, aren't they?
I think they spawn everywhere now.
Yeah, I was going to say,
Or
it used to be real
attempt to.
specific areas like, and one of the things in addition to the blueback, and this is just my opinion from my years of experience, but when the fish used to spawn in the old Cedar Keys, everybody was there, you know. And then they brought whoever into the dam area, and they had a barge there for about a month with their big Navy diver suits, air compressor running day in, day out, and they computerized the turbines. And that's when I saw a change. The fish moved from Cedar Keys to the dam, and I had never seen them not spawn in Cedar Keys. They spawned at the dam that year, and they spawned there for a couple years, and then they slowly moved up into Craddock, and now they're spawning in Craddock, maybe because it's a creek and they're going upstream. It's hard to say. But a lot of the fishing patterns I've seen have changed over the years. One of the things I noticed that we used to go out, particularly in the fall, but in the spring too, you'd go out before daylight and you'd hear the gizzard shad come up popping, you know, particularly in the creeks and stuff. Like you go out for a pre-dawn topwater in October, and you'd hear the gizzard shad start popping, and then you'd hear kapoosh, kapoosh, you know. and you hear them coming in behind, and you'd start catching them, and then they'd go past you, and then they come back, Don't hear that anymore. So it's a lot of the patterns that there's not a pattern to all the patterns other than what area you're going to fish in. So you don't know a lot of times what time of day they're going to show up. Summertime fishing, years ago, we used to be one fish by 7:30 and done by 9. And then they would disappear all day long until evening. And there was no middle of the day fishing like there is now, which is great. Because you can go out, different times of day. So those two things, have impacted the fishing. And the bluebacks, they're pretty baits, but God, they're fast. They're a pain in the butt to deal with, but they're pretty and they eat them good. So, and from what I understand, unless somebody else knows something I don't, I heard that they weren't put in here, that somebody brought them in.
The story was that, once they started having regular tournaments and people were coming from North Carolina, they were bringing their bait.
Yeah.
And, at the end of the day, emptying their tank out. And it doesn't take long for bluebacks or redfins to establish in a lake.
Yeah.
So.
And what I see in my bait tank is, and I've heard this, different people, that they're crossbreeding now.
Yes.
Because you can't hardly catch them in the tank. Like you want to go out with you could probably go out with 50, 60 baits, and if you hit the fish good and you get low because you're fishing 8, 10 rods and you're moving a lot, you can't catch them. So then you want more so you can catch them.
Right.
And they'd scoop them up in the net, and I'm so short that they splash and they get water all over my sunglasses and stuff. I'd be nuts. But they catch fish. So those are the biggest changes I've seen, those two things. And the fish kill, I think part of that, and Dan and I talked about it a little bit, but the copepod, it came in and it definitely was heavy the first year it came in. And the fish died mostly, from what I understand, late June and the first couple of weeks of July. Is that anybody else? Yeah.
Sounds right.
And everybody thought it was the copepod, but then the fish didn't die the rest of July, August, and September with the heat. And the copepod was still in them. So, and that was one year that, and I forget what Dan said, but this is what I came up with. That year, I remember it rained once a week during the spawn, very heavily. Changed the surface temp, so the fish couldn't get up to spawn because it changed the nest. And then they just held off and they weren't feeding. And all I remember is catching the females were totally emaciated. Their bellies were indented, and there were some fish floating, stressed out and stuff. So, because we still have a little bit of the copepod, but not like it was the first year. So
when was that die-off? Was that like 03 or was that?
that was it was about the same time they computerized the turbines. 13,
02, 03,
Yeah. So, anyway. But the movement of water definitely, you don't see movement anymore. You go up, like you can't get up there right now, all the way above Bay Rock in the upper river to fish in this in March and early April for the big fish. There used to be current all the time up there because of the movement of water at the dam. And now you can go up and you can fish any way you want to. Up there, you used to have to go up and drift because you couldn't pull against the trolling motor. You'd burn your trolling motor up half an hour. So now you can go up and do donuts and stuff, but then I don't think the fish go up the same. Like, it seems like over the years they've gone up more in the evenings during the spawn, spend the time overnight, and then come out in the morning. They're not in there all day like they used to be. So that's another change I've seen.
Do you want to talk to people about your your setup, especially like when you're going into like that early spring? Because raise your hand if you fish now. Like if you're fishing now, raise your hand if you're fishing now. Okay, maybe about half. Some of our members won't start fishing until we start getting good weather in March.
Mm-hmm.
What are you looking for, like late February, early March?
I'm not here.
You're not there.
I'm in Colorado.
But you're when you start your spring fishing, are you about?
No, I don't. Last couple of years I haven't started till June
Okay.
because the fishing's so choppy in April, May.
Okay.
A lot of my customers found it very, 1 year you'd catch them and the next year you wouldn't catch anything. Very inconsistent. So the years, like I had regulars always in March, April, October, November. Those were like the prime, that was the prime time fishing months we started with when we started part-time. That's how we came up with the name, that we fished the prime feeding months. And most of my customers have switched to June, from April, May to June. And the November, because of the slot, they switched to October, and then the October switched to September because with the weather changing and the fish migrating and moving so much, it was harder to stay on top of them. And with the bluebacks, the other thing I'm finding is that the fish seem to be staying schooled more in April, October. You're not able to get up on the banks like you used to. And you used to be able to go out in March, early April, and my house is right above the bridge. And you could go out and just start pulling the points on the main channel and pull into the creeks. And you'd see fish just about everywhere from here to Bay Rock. And now, Bert was telling me one April, he's the hockey player.
You gotta talk, if you're gonna talk about Bert, you gotta talk like him. So let's hear your impersonation of Bert.
Kathy, we killing them, come on. He says, and he doesn't say plurals. In all the years I've known him, over 20 years, and I knew him before he started guiding, I said, Bert, how you fishing? He says, I fish 9 rod. Not, I'm fishing 10 rods and 2 planer boards, and I put 2 planer, 2 down, nothing's changed. And he doesn't say A. Okay. He's adamant about that. But he caught, one day he told me he caught 22 up at Bluebird, which is Hatfield Creek. Hatcher Creek. No, which one? Hatfield.
Just between the Indian and Grimes.
I call it Bluebird, yeah.
Yeah, Bluebird.
And the next day he went, never saw a fish, got skunked. So like usually when you were in a pattern like that, you could go back. We would get patterns that would go a week to 3 weeks, and you could time the fish. Now you can't. Now it seems like you got to hunt them more, and hopefully you got other friends out there to help you out. I talk to everybody. I talk to Striper Club members. I talk to locals. If I'm passing somebody, I always ask them how they're doing, and if they ask me, I tell them. I'm not picky about giving away information or not. Like, no, you can't tell me, I'm a guide.
So is your strategy to ride around and look for fish on the electronics and then start fishing, or do you
Well,
go to
mostly for the
spots
time
and
of
look?
year I'm fishing, June and September, I'll do some pulls. Like one of my favorite pulls is to pull the bait light at the 30 marker right above my house.
Mm-hmm.
Seems like there's always fish there because it's a good bait light. And I knew some guys that used to fish around captain's quarters when Dwayne was there. They would just go back and forth when we go over in the morning and catch bait. And they'd be catching, and how many y'all got? Oh, we got 12. And they're just fishing the fish coming in on the light, So it's, most of the patterns I'm fishing now other than like early June, and then toward later June they school up, so you're chasing the schools through the summer. And then like I said, September, even October, they're staying so schooled that you pretty much look for them. There's... No, go ahead.
We're not members yet, but we will be.
You want to be, yeah.
And I've been bass fishing, Smith, at least 45 years, and striper fishing, mostly been greenfish. Now we live very near the lake, where it used to be, hey, I get to go every couple of weeks. We're 2 miles from Hardy Bridge right now, so now it's a couple times every week. Could you talk a little bit about the striper movements, because it seems like I've fished more this winter than I've ever fished in my life, and I'll go out and I'll put it in Hardy, and there's stripers there in the morning. And the day before Christmas, I was having fun in Linville, and you go 2 days later and they're gone. Like, where do they go, and how can
I don't know.
how can they
I
move?
wish I wish I had a little tracker on it to see where they went. 'Cause when they disappear, I don't care how many boats you got looking for them. It seems like when they disappear, they disappear. They don't like the noise of the engine. They don't like the shadow of the boat.
Benny's Creek. When I put it in Hardy, I went all over Benny's
Yeah.
Creek.
You know, like I said, it
I'm
used to be
worried.
you could get patterns going, and they would go for week, 2 weeks at a time. Now, it's a lot of hit and miss, you know, and like you said, you hope you got a good network like the club is, of people you can talk to, and Dwayne with his fish report at the shop, so you can keep up with what's going on, you know. I mean, the one thing I do know about the lake is all the fish are damn healthy. I mean, and we've got a lot of good, I catch a lot of bass a lot of times, and if, you know, you bass fish, most of the time, and particularly September, October, they all start fishing the banks, and the bass are where the boat's sitting. They haven't moved up that far. And, you know, they're catching little ones on the bank, but I'm catching 4 or 5 pounders minimum, a lot.
Did you catch a big catfish a few years back, I remember?
Yeah, I caught it wasn't certified lake record, but it was over 50 pounds. We could hardly lift it up. Took 2 of us to get it in the boat with the nets. And I was striper fishing, and that was Betty's Creek in October, like middle of October. I had 6 schools of stripers go under the boat, caught 1 striper and 7 flatheads. So October, a lot, that time of year, you're fishing the you know, that 25, 30 to 35 foot depth and stuff. The catfish do run a lot with the stripers then. So you will catch them.
Kathy, the topic of vegetation came up a little bit ago, and I'm wondering, was there more vegetation at one time in the lake? How has that changed over time, and what effect did the grass carp have?
I don't know what they've done with the grass carp. You know, I did see some vegetation in my cove about 5 years ago or so, and I reported it. But
Is it
it
invasive,
died
or-
out and it never came back. I don't really know much about the vegetation, because like I said, where I'm fishing, I don't see it.
Is
You know,
there
I fish
anything
mostly the
considered
Roanoke
natural?
side. What's that?
Is there anything considered natural vegetation here, or is it all invasive?
Dwayne might know more about that because he's a bass fisherman.
Yeah, it's hydro, it's invasive.
45 years ago, there was grass all over this lake.
Really?
And you could fish, I actually won a bass tournament probably 45 years ago, fishing a bass, a grass bed in about 18 feet of water across from Betty's Creek on the other side of the lake.
Yeah.
And there were grass beds, you know, if you could find a clear water flat in 10 to 20 feet,
Uh-huh.
grass all
See, I
over.
hadn't seen that since I've
No,
been
it
here.
was-
You know,
there was
I said I
grass
started
everywhere on this lake.
35 years ago, 89.
Yeah, in the 80s, yes, sir.
Yeah, and with the lake being so deep, you didn't see it. Now, we came from a lake, Lake Anna and Lake Louisa, and they put the grass carp in there, and they just ate everything. They put less than what they thought was needed, and this was years ago, before we moved down here. And you couldn't even water ski anymore because you just fall into the weeds. But I never saw a lot of grass, like even up the river. You know, I did a lot of fishing above Bay Rock for years in the spring, and never saw a lot up that way. I just didn't come across it where I was fishing, even though we were fishing close to the banks back then before all the docks were built. You know, it's like now you can't hardly run the banks because there's too many docks in your way. You can't get your planer boards in there anymore. You can cast, but
Do you do any winter fishing? Are you fishing this time of year, or are you fishing?
they're right in front of my house. You know where the VT Go Hokey Dock is?
Yeah, we'll be
Above the
right
bridge?
over.
That's my cousin Sharon. I live right to the left of her.
I don't get that far up the lake. I'm bigger.
Good, stay down the lane.
Yeah,
we don't
want
Stay down the lane.
They've been out in
It's a
front.
waste
They've
of
been out in front up in what we call campers, which is Jake's,
More of a concern about it.
for over a month.
Yeah.
They're all out in front. Last Friday, I came across the bridge and there was 6 boats from the bridge to Bridgewater Plaza, all out there jigging.
That was
And,
my question.
and I
How do you catch them when the water gets below 50? My fishing's not near as good when it drops below 50.
See, I never did winter fishing. Spike and I ski in the winters. We go to Colorado.
We're in Colorado.
We ski Copper Mountain mostly, and Steamboat, out Frisco, Breckenridge area.
Yes.
We've been doing that since we started dating 42 years ago.
We do winter parties, so.
Yeah, yeah. They're late opening up. They're just getting open.
Yeah.
They're having a snow drought.
Rich had a question back
Yeah.
in the back.
Yeah, actually, I would say the question, I was gonna ask, now that the water's, kind of settled out, we're in like winter patterns, what are you doing?
Well, Spike's been going out quite a bit because they're right in front of the house, and he can't catch him on a jig, but everybody else is. We downsized the jigs because of the winter bite, so, biting the heads off the flukes to make them smaller. You can buy littler ones using those, smaller spoons. And the spooning thing, years ago, we used to actually jig the spoons in the summer, particularly for the fish like this. And now most everybody's doing the dead stick or the rip, where you get down below the school and you rip those huge spoons that look better than my earrings, up through the schools, and they're just slamming them that way. And, I'm getting ready to switch over if I fish this summer to do that because it's a lot easier than dealing with trying to catch that bait in the summer and fighting everybody on the lights and throwing that net at 3 o'clock in the morning and trying to get my shift in.
So that brings up a good point right now, like, folks that are fishing right now, is anyone using live bait? I know Pat talked earlier, you're using live bait now? A little bit. Is it most of it's though artificial, like going out with jigs and stuff like that, going out jigging and casting and stuff like that? Okay. Rich, I'll get you out one day. Have you ever jigged before?
Yeah, I'm starting to now.
Okay.
And actually, finally broke down and got the live scope, so, that's certainly, been helpful, but, yeah, I mean, I think, like some of the comments earlier, I'm seeing them, they're curious.
They're looking at it.
Yeah, sometimes they'll follow it up, but, it's tough getting them to take it, and, again,
Yeah, this has been the weirdest winter bite I think I've heard people talk about in a long time. Like there was one day, it might have been last Friday, Josh caught 12. Guy over in the Blackwater side caught 30. And then I heard Chad Taxi got 40 jigging. And but that was just all the same day. So like they turned on. And you'd think usually like the summer months the fish pour through like they're doing now. And you think out of hundreds and hundreds of fish, there'd be a few more stupid ones. But they're not. So, yeah, you just gotta, like, Tommy, Wicked Striper went out with his kids the other day and got up near Jake's place, and they got one on bait. He had his kids with him, so his one son caught one on bait. But then, Spike had a buddy up, and they were going out a couple hours here, a couple hours there, and they managed to catch one a day, but jigging and with bait. They were using minnows, they were using live bait, they were using and jigging, and it was just, they just couldn't get them to hit. But I wasn't out there, so I don't know.
It seems like, they're smaller groups of fish for sure, and they're bolting everywhere. I mean, it's like
Well, some of the groups are massive.
yeah, so I haven't seen that.
I mean, I'm seeing the boats almost every day right out in front of my cove, between me and the bridge, and just sitting there. And you can tell they're on anchor. And like I said, I've been doing year-end books, so I've been doing taxes and all that stuff I hate to do. But the boys have been going out, and they come back in, and they're just pouring under. And they even talked about one time on the electronics where they could see the bait just kind of balloon up like this, like the stripers come up and, chasing it. But, and usually yours is left and then you catch some, but that wasn't the case that day. So, but things I've learned over the years with fishing, if the fish are short striking, if you're using live bait, downsize your bait. If you're in a lot of bait, and they just can't see you because of all the bait, then go big and see if the odd man out works. Try those things. If that doesn't work, leave and go somewhere else. Like if you end up near Bay Rock, up near where you were at, in the fall, the bait is so thick up there, it sounds like it's raining. You know, and you'll see fish rolling up there between the
I've never
upper
seen that.
trestle and the marina, and they're everywhere. But you know, and you can stay an hour and pull, you know, have 8 lines out, boards and, you know, corks and everything out there, and you get one or none. So after a while, you just give it up and then go find some that aren't in the middle of all that same situation.
They're a little hungrier.
Yeah.
So Kathy, if you were going in the morning, where would you go and what would you, how would you set up?
I'd go out right in front of the house and look for them.
Yeah,
Yeah, in the channel there, they're in the channel. And they seem to be moving into the creeks. Well, they've been in Betty and Becky's, some in the back. And they've been in front of Jake's place, I mean, out, particularly in front of the buoys before you go in. You know, right in that area. You can try that in the morning and see if maybe they're doing a morning bite. Then go out on the channel in the daytime when they're just stacked up thick. And then in the afternoon, it seems like they move back into the creek. Or if you don't see them in the creek in the morning, go back in the afternoon. Because they've been, you know, the ones right in front of the house that we've been playing with, you know, just the last 3 weeks or so. That seems to be the pattern. If if they're not there in the morning, go out on the channel, check the channel. Not there, go back later, check. There've been some right in front of, at the mouth of Stony, just inside the mouth and just outside the mouth. So that's the, you know, we haven't been going far from the house.
Does the temperature this time, like, eliminate certain zones, like the water
I
temperature?
I can't answer that one for you. You know, people always, for years, like, my water temperature didn't work on my boat, you know, and people always ask, what's the water temperature? I said, I don't know. And then I finally got a machine that registered it, but,
It's more depth.
I don't,
What's the temperature of the lake down at 50 feet now? I don't know.
I don't know. Joel was the one that used to do more.
Yeah, I see
that
the
stuff.
20 foot, and that's about.
I just-
46 degrees.
All the years I've been fishing, I just fish where I find fish, and I put the bait where I see them.
But I always
Try
was
that.
told a striper they can't tolerate either too hot or too cold water. Is that?
Yeah, well, they like oxygen, temperature, and bait is their main focus. So, like I said, you just once you find them, you fish
Yeah.
them there.
So,
Now, in the cold
Just
cold
fine.
front months, like in March when we used to get cold fronts in, a lot of times, you know, if we weren't doing well in the morning, we, you know, and like I said, we'd fish from the bridge to the bridge or above the bridge, you know, cover that whole area and all the creeks that are there and stuff. You go in the creeks, out of the creeks, you know, mouths of the creeks, on the channel. I fish a lot of points because fish feed on points. So if you can find them near a point, that
So that's
sometimes helps
usually
a lot.
it's a shallower area, the points, right? Or is it in deep water, or it doesn't matter?
Well, it doesn't matter, but it's a point, and, you know, they
Right.
can ambush the bait,
Yeah,
you know, with
yeah,
the
like
point
out
there.
into-
It just seems like you get more reaction strikes when you're on a point. Like, for example, I was down at Cedar Keys one year, when the fish were still spawning down there. And we were in, I don't know if you've been there, but you go in and we had the first cove is called the number one hole. Second cove is the number 2 hole. Then there's the back, and then there's, the red dock hole on the left. And we were all in the number 2 hole, and everybody was anchored up, and some guys got there early, got the crest of the point on the front of the 2 hole. Spike was next, I was in the middle, and one of the other guys was next to me. Then there's a little dip, and then it goes back, and there's another little dip. I watched Spike catch 12 fish. I watched the other guy catch 14 fish, but all on the opposite end of their boats. And people were going by, it was a weekend. They're going by me, they're saying, Kathy, they're everywhere. And I was casting my bait out right behind their engines where their transducer was and letting the line out. So it would drop right where the fish were, you know, hoping to get a bite, and nothing. So Spike finally, after he got his 12, he only had 2 people. He says, calls me up, he says, Kathy, I'm moving. He goes, move out so you can get in, you know, because it's, you know, like trying to find a parking space when the lot's full. And so we did, so we pulled in, and I ended up catching 14. And the deal was, and this happened, the guy I was telling you that passed away, Mark Barber, he lived down in Witcher Creek. and he fished the lake, God, 38, 40 years, and predominantly bottom fished. And he taught me a lot about it, but we were in there one day, and on the first cove, and he was anchored up on the point, and the fish were all over the point, just covered, like 16 to 30 feet connected to the bottom, all over it. And I had a full layout. I had 4 planer boards out. I had a couple down rods. I had some free lines out the back, and I'm going over all these fish. And while 10 minutes covering that point, I didn't get a bite, and I watched him hook 10. And I looked at my clients, and I said, we can do that. So I I had a troll motor. I pulled up the lines, and I pulled over. I said, do you mind if I set up on this side of you? He goes, oh, come on, go ahead. So we set up, and I got a 22-foot deck boat. I put 9 rods out. He's only fishing 2. He's on the crest of the point, and I'm on drop off here, okay? I watched him outfish me for half an hour or more, and he kept going like this. He'd go get his bait, he'd go down like this. And I finally got the binoculars out and looking at my client, what is he doing, And he's spraying WD-40 on his baits. And I looked at my clients and said, we got that. So I did a test. I did WD, no WD, WD, no WD. And we caught fish on both. So I don't know if it really made a difference or not. But the thing that I finally patterned out is every single fish we hooked was closest to his boat on the crest of that point. So I'm a firm believer in fishing the points. If you got one close to you.
Kathy, can I add something
Yeah.
to that? And this goes back to the live scope and all of that. One thing that I've noticed here recently, and I'll go with what Kathy said. I will fish the channel some, but mostly this time of year, I'm fishing these points, and you can see with that live scope, you can see the fish. They run up these points. You can see it. You can see them if the deep water's here and the shoreline is here. You can sit your boat, you can scope them out there in 45 or 50 feet of water on the bottom, and here they come. They'll come right under your boat. They'll go up. They'll run up to about 10 or 12 feet deep, and then here they come right back again. And I don't know if it's different groups of fish that come and do that, as they move up and down the channel, or if it's the same group of fish or whatever. But
It could be either one.
slow down right now, slow down this time of year, and it's very hard to see these fish on your traditional sonar. Slow down, shoot your live scope, and be patient. If you see, if this is the bottom, and you see a little bump on the bottom, slow down, because there's probably more with that. And you throw a swim bait over top of them, or you throw a fluke on a jig, and you bring it across the top of them, you have to slow your bait down. You want that bait barely moving, and then all of a sudden it's like a swarm of bees. That you'll see one little bump, and that one bump will be 20 or 30 fish, and then all of a sudden you get that, there they are. But don't stop your bait. If you stop your bait, they're gone. Don't stop your bait.
What he's talking about too, I've had different scenarios, pulling the shoreline, and generally if I get a bite, within, 25, 50 yards, 2 fish, within, pulling a stretch, not sitting still. If I get 2 fish real close together, I always turn around and go back, because they can be working from the trees up to the bank you're on. And I've had that happen a number of times. Whereas you keep going and you don't get any more bites. You turn around and come back, they're not going along the shoreline like you are. They're working from the trees up to the bait, and then go back. And then back up, let bait school back up on that flat or whatever it is that's, holding it there. And they'll work it back and forth sometimes like that.
In that case, why don't you just jig the trees?
What?
In that case, why don't you just jig the trees? You know that's where they're going, right? The
Yeah, but that's their living room. You wanna catch them in the kitchen. They're sitting in the living room in the trees, and then they're up here on the flat is the kitchen. So sometimes you gotta figure out what part of the house they're in. You know, it's, I mean, you can try it,
Now, they're in the
if
part
you
of the
see
house
'em.
that has all my umbrella right.
but like I said, you know, see, that was a more shallow pattern I was fishing than that particular scenario. Like, I would say that was probably April. So I wasn't really, I was going for the feeding fish and not, like I said, the ones sitting, so. But like I said, if you can't find them up there feeding, then you gotta look other places. So like I said, what I was saying earlier about the temperature change, since I never had a temperature gauge for years, a lot of times on a cold front, if we were not catching fish, then as the day went on, when I used fish full days, a lot of times we would sometimes just move 5 miles up the river, you know, where the water was shallow, like up towards the Mormons or up, you know, up towards the Trestles or whatever. And also, like in front of 75, there's that nice clay flat in front of that farm. You know what I'm talking about? Well, that mud, that'll warm up faster. So sometimes you'll find fish feeding there. And then speaking of mud, which as a bass fisherman you probably know too, on a windy day you get the wind blowing, or when we get the heavy rains in the whenever we get them, because you never know anymore. But it used to be more in the spring. Linville Creek loves to muddy up, and I love fishing that mud line because the baits will be in the mud and the fish will go in and out of the mud line to, you know, to ambush the baits. And then, you know, and also if you have a point of land where the wind's blowing down and it's blowing the mud off that point, that's a good point to fish because that dingy water is cover for the bait fish.
As far as bait, do you pretty much fish the lights, or you have any other strategy?
What do you mean?
Catching bait, live bait.
Depends on the time of year. You know, like generally, well, my light produces really good at my dock when we get home in the spring, and it's good from, you know, when we get home into June, even sometimes 1st of July, and then I've got to go to deeper water. But it's right there and it produces, so I don't have to go far. But usually in the spring and the fall, we usually go into the creeks to catch the baits. You know, wherever you see them flipping, like, you know, back I call it Campers, but Jake's Place, Stony, Indian, Bluebird Grimes, Jump and Run, Beaver Dam, Linville. But Beaver Dam and Linville, now, I don't know how many people have been out lately. Some of these creeks are getting so shallow you can't get where you used to get. You know, I went into Beaver Dam, what was it? I guess it was late September, early October to look for bait, and I went all the way to the back, and you know where the boat ramp comes in on the left, and there's that sliding board straight ahead? I made the turn, and the channel is more on the left side once you get past the boat ramp. Well, I ran aground. There's no water, and then on the right side, where the other boat ramp is, the community, that subdivision ramp, you can't even hardly get over there.
Yeah, I'm on the other side, but
Yeah.
It's getting ridiculous.
It's in Stony's bad, you know, that you gotta be careful going back to see bait. Be able to throw that net a long way to catch them.
Has this year been lower than historically, or I haven't been on?
Yeah, I haven't seen this low in a long time. I've seen it lower than this once. Yeah, we had to put a step ladder on our floater to get up to the stationary dock, that the steps you couldn't even get from your 3 steps on your floater up. It was that bad. What's that?
I've seen my dock lower than what it is.
Yeah, like I said, I've seen it high too.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
But I'm a lot of the guides love fishing big baits for those big fish. You know, Dwayne's one of them, and me, I'm out just to catch fish for my clients. At the end of the day, like we used to trophy fish years ago. I mean, Spike has the state record in '88, and one year we had like 37 trophies just from April through May between the two of us. And most of the clients at the end of the day, you know, if you trophy hunt, they're not happy if you don't come in with one. most people wanna catch a fish, and it seems like now that we're getting more families involved, a lot more families. And when I first started fishing, it was almost all guys, and that's when the bucket, that was an issue. They had to write an article about how discreetly after coffee, that Kathy takes care of business, don't worry about it. They were all worried that I'd have to go in to take a break from fishing, and I'm worried more about clients not wanting to pee in the bucket, so I don't have to go in and quit fishing. So, but I like all sizes of bait, because like I said, if they're short striking, you downsize. If one size isn't working, and then you need to have the variety to switch and see what you can work out. Now, one thing Mark, the guy that I was telling you about that just passed away, is a bottom fisherman. This is something that I researched. We were fishing down in June down at what we call Elmo's, which what's the name of that? Across from the dam.
Elmo Mitchell.
No, there's another, Forest Cove. On the map, it's Forest Cove, and I never knew that for years until somebody said, they're in Forest Cove, and I said, where the hell's that? And we call it Elmo's, because they had a farm there. We were anchored up and catching fish, and he calls me up, he says, Kathy, do you have a 50-pound scale? And I said, yeah. He says, I think I got the state record. I said, well, come on over, So he comes over in his John boat, and I was anchored up, and he pulled around to the far side of me, on the bank side, so he wouldn't interfere with my lines. And he had this, it was 41 pounds. Wow. And I looked down and I said, that's not the new state record. I said, but it rivals the one on our wall at home, And so he told the story. He was all excited. So he hung out for a little bit with us. And so I was changing the bait while we were still fishing while we were talking. And he's chit-chatting with the couple that was on the boat with me. And when I went to hook the bait, I hooked it in the back behind the dorsal fin. And he goes, you hook them in the back? I'm like, well, yeah, doesn't everybody? He says, no, I hook them in the belly. And he says, that way, he says, you don't hit the spine, so you get better movement with your bait. And if you look at your baits, and he showed this to me, if you feel the back of a LY or blueback, it's real soft and, slimy, kind of wide. If you get down to the belly part here, all the scales come together in a point like this. And when you hook through, it bites. The hook doesn't come out as easily as in the back, it'll rip right out. But if you hook them in the belly, the way those scales come together like that holds that hook in. And the hook's in the middle of the bait, whether you hook it in the back or the belly. So I did another test, like the WD-40. WD, no WD. Well, after he left, I did belly, back. I had 10 rods out. And we caught him on all of them. But I think that the fact that the bait stays on better, and stripers will hit dead bait on the bottom. I had a lot of people, I used to obsessively change my baits. And you remember Lewis Ratliff? He's still around, but not fishing. I was down at the spawn with him one day, bottom fishing. And I asked him, I said, Lewis, I kept changing my bait every 20 minutes, the whole thing, all 8, 10 rods. And I said, Lewis, how often do you check your baits? He goes, if they bite it. He was from West Virginia. And he caught as many fish as I did. So then one day I was fishing with a little island at the dam on the bottom, and they were hitting like this size LYs or bluebacks, whatever you call them. They didn't want the littler ones. They really liked that size. So I had one left. Got a bite, and I reeled it in, and I still had the bait on, so I rehooked it in the belly. Tossed it back out. Got another bite. Reeled it in, still had it. So third time's a charm. Hooked it up, and caught the fish. So they will hit, I don't know many people. I've heard of a few people fishing like cut bait, where they take the gizzard shad and they cut the fillet out like they do at the bay and use the fillet. And I fished cut bait at Lake Murray with, first got I ever fished with Groovy Granny down there, and we caught them in the summer, but they were small fish. So every time I do any kind of cut bait or chum, I get catfish. But the hooking them in the belly, I really like that technique that I learned from my buddy. And then I went up on YouTube, and how do you hook fish for bottom fishing? And it, had a little bit of everywhere, salt water, fresh water. Everybody hooks them in the back, but me and Mark. So that helps you out, I hope.
What kind of hooks do you use, what size?
I'm not that picky. Spike is. My husband also guides, if y'all didn't know that too. He's been in 2 years longer than me. I used to always, match my hook to the size bait. I've gotten lazy over the years, and to me, I'm using a 1/0 or a 2/0. But I can hardly tell the difference between those two. Now, if I'm fishing bigger baits, like if I was pulling big gizzard shad, I'd go up to like a 4. I would like a, But I have caught some fish, in the last 6-7 years, 18, 20 pounders on 2/0 hooks.
Circle hook
So
or
circle
jig?
hooks, yeah, the circle hooks. And one thing I'll tell you, I like the circle hooks because if they catch here in the lip, you really got, you hardly not going to lose your fish there. But I've had them hooked in the bottom lip, I've hit the top lip. The thing that I do not like about circle hooks, and I've lost fish on this, and it took me 6 months to figure it out, is because, does everybody understand how circle hooks work? The way they're designed, they curl. Okay, well, what happens is, I was losing fish, and I was breaking them off. And I was breaking it off real close to the hook. So I thought it was my knot. Like the first one came kind of squiggled. And I'm like, so I got meticulous about my knots. And every week, 10 days, it happened again. Then it happened again. And finally, after 6 months, I found that the circle hooks keep curling. So they go in and they go through here, come out here, and they hook the skin and hook the skin. So you got the tip of the hook here, the eye here. The fish turns this way, your line goes straight across the end of the hook, and you break your fish off. That's what I don't like about them. Because I've had too many that, and after picking it out, turning it and pulling it out, I finally figured out the pattern, and I talked to Fred Price, an old guy here, and I said, Fred, what do you think of this theory? And he goes, oh my God, I'm so glad you figured that out. And as far as circle hooks, as far as gut hook fish, I don't see a difference. The fish that gut hook want a gut hook. And most of the time, I'm almost always have my reels locked. Because we use softer tip, medium lights. So it gives a little more pull so the fish don't feel the tension before the rod, and gives the circle hook enough time to do its thing. And then we also teach our clients to crank first before you lift with circle hooks. Because if you're holding the rod with a circle hook and they start to bite, you can't jerk, or you're going to shorten that arc and it's going to come out of the mouth. So you've got to either let the fish pull you down, or like it says on the package, just reel. Which is hard to do because everybody wants to jerk. So we tell everybody when we yell fish on, you run up and you crank the handle twice first before you lift. And that way you're not going to rush it.
Anybody else have any questions for Captain Kathy? Kathy, you have anything else you want to share with us?
No. If I'm guiding, call me if you want to learn something. I'm the only one that teaches, pretty much. The rest of them fish. But I enjoy teaching people and explaining to them. I had so many questions in the early years, especially with the guys. When we first started fishing, it was mostly all men, and they were all, hiring guys trying to learn and this and that. And I got tired of answering the questions, so I just started explaining, talking out loud, like, okay, we're going to move here, and we're going to try this because the bait's here, and we're going to do this, and we're going to use big bait because there's too much bait, and then we're going to try fishing in front of the bait, so we beat them to the big schools of bait they're going in the creeks to feed on, and, kind of just talking about my reasoning about why I'm starting here, going there, doing this, doing that, kind of thing. So.
I just got a funny story. The first time I fished on the lake with a guy, I was out with Spike, my son and Spike. We were having a good old time. We weren't catching anything, and you were patiently calling him, telling him, well, we just got 2 here. And you could tell, we kept looking at him, and he kept looking at us. finally he's like shaking his head, he's like, pull up the lines. But it was like begrudgingly, it's like a competition, it seemed like to me.
Oh, it is, he's very competitive.
Oh,
I wouldn't
yeah.
be competitive if he wasn't.
He was grumbling, but
And-
we
He
caught
started it.
fish when we got to where you were, it was.
But, oh, no, and it's crazy, it's like, you know, we'll call each other in on the fish and then they shut down. And it's like, he'll look at me, he says, you scared my fish away. You know, it's all,
He
you know,
was shaking his.
it's all
he said,
luck and
"Pull the
timing
lines
and,
up."
you know, putting the energy into it and stuff. I mean, and like I say, some days, and, like this year, Josh, he got hot as a firecracker. He had horseshoes all over his boat like this, raising, you know, he was on a roll of catching fish like I'd never seen. He picked up a group at the boat ramp there at Oak Grove and was idling out, and there were the fish. You know, some days it happens like that. You know, they're just, here they are. And then funny things will happen, like one time I was coming down from up the lake and heading towards Beaver Dam to go in the creek to fish, and I was on the right-hand side of the lake coming down, and I don't fish that side as much as I fish the Beaver Dam side. But I've fished every piece of the bank over the years, from here to at least Gills Creek. And we were coming down the lake. We'd caught fish up at Mormon's. We caught fish at the tennis courts. We were coming down the full day, going in to fish the creek to see if we could catch some more fish. And the turkeys flew across the lake. And I stopped because I had a bunch of hunters on the boat, and I like to look at the wildlife. I don't hunt, but, you know, I still love it. So I stopped, and we watched all these turkeys flying from the boat and land on this rock point. And they go up the hill, and we're talking about, oh, that one's got a big beard, and, you know. So I'm in neutral and didn't even cut the key off, and went to shift into forward. Now, to force a habit, looked at the electronics, and we were covered. So sometimes, you know, it's amazing your lefts and rights will put you on fish when you least expect it. You know, that's what makes it interesting. We fished a lake in Tennessee for 7 summers in Cherokee Lake. And I don't know what makes the fish bite there other than that they moved water every single day, pretty much the same. So they had a tide going. That's the only thing I can figure because, you know, I've fished Lake Anna, I've fished Norris, I've fished Watts Bar, I've fished Daboon, you know, and none of them bite like the fish bite down there. You know, I love this area better. I wish the fish bit a little better than down there, but the fish bit so good that after 3 weeks I was bored.
Wow.
Other than putting big groups of people, you'd get on fishing, you'd have 6 people hooked up all at the same time, you know, and you were running around and it made it crazy. But this is a finicky lake.
It is.
It's, you know, it's a tough lake. You gotta work hard, but I mean, it's got lots of fish in it. They're healthy and they're delicious to eat, and we have some recipes on our webpage. I need to put ceviche on there now.
That is good.
Yeah.
Would you mind sharing some of those recipes that we can cross-reference over to the Striper Club?
Yeah, I got some on my website, but I don't have the ceviche written
Okay.
down.
Okay.
But you can Google it.
Yeah, it's just onion, lime juice.
No, it's whatever you want to put in it. It's
Okay.
lime juice that cooks the fish.
Yes.
But you can put cucumbers, celery, red onions, jalapenos, avocados at the end, mangoes. You know, whatever you want in it. It's more like a salsa kind of thing. When you,
It's really good.
but it is delicious.
Thank you, Kathy.
Yeah.
We have 50 people here tonight.
Hey, Chad.
Let's do 5.
All right, it's gonna be for door prizes over on the table.